What's up, guys? Welcome to More Than Sawdust. My name is Chris, and today I'm so excited that we've got a fantastic build video for you. Now, this is a client build of ours, and what they've requested is a console table to go between their couch and their back wall. They've got end tables currently. They don't like how they stick out and get in the way, so they wanted us to build them something that went in between the back wall and the couch, and that way they can set their lamps, their books, their phones, drinks, anything else they wanted to on there. They also requested a shelf on the end, a couple shelves, that way they can put books and store some things in that, because that's going to be the only access is from the end. Now here's the unique part of this. We've got a $200 budget for this build. Yep, 200 bucks. So you know what that means. We're heading to Home Depot and we're picking up some construction lumber, 2x4s, 2x6s, and 2x10s. And let's see what we could come up with. So let's go. All right, so we're going to start off working on the top for this project. Now that may be backwards, I know, but I had help in the shop for this day, so I wanted to make sure that I utilized that help all I could for these longer boards. So we're going to take two 2x10s, and we're going to rip down the sides and clean up those edges. And you know, when you're working with construction lumber, you've got to do all you can to straighten edges and surfaces and try to make it look as good as you can. And so that's what we're doing here now. Now our final dimensions for this top are going to be 82 inches by 17 inches. And so I'm taking that into consideration, how much I'm ripping off the sides. And then of course, again, when you're working with lumber like this, find the sides you want to be your top, and look at your knot holes and all those type of things and decide what you want to face upwards, and go ahead and mark that. And so you know, as you're finishing up your processing or your milling, that you know which side you're gonna have as the top, and then how they fit together is a big deal too, of course. So I think we've got what we like here, the best option for what we got. And now look, I know this jointer is not made for boards this long, not even close. But I thought it'd be the best and fastest option for trying to get these flat for my glue up. So I got my helper again to kind of help hold these as well as we can on the jointer as we run them through. And then I had a few spots that just weren't sitting flush, so I'm just cleaning up those places. And then really take your time here. This is important to make sure that your seams where you're doing your glue up is going to be as tight as possible. That's less work you got to do later with filling and sanding and things like that. So you really want to take your time here. Now I'm marking out the spots where I want to put my dowels. Now there's a lot of ways you can do this. You can use biscuits, or if you got a domino, you can certainly use that. Or you can just do a glue up. Now because this is pine construction lumber and it has a tendency to bow at times or things like that, I thought putting in some dowels would be a great way to help keep these aligned and keep these boards flat as they go through and move forward. So put in the dowels here. We're drilling for those. I've just got a simple little handheld dowel jig, nothing fancy, pretty cheap, but it's always worked just fine for me and the purposes I need it for. And we're just using a little Titebond 3. Now, this is not going to be outdoors, so a lot of people would use 2 or original for it. Titebond 3 is just, it's what I keep on hand, so I end up using it for everything. Now, my favorite part of this is playing whack-a-mole with the dowel pins. It's always fun hitting things with a mallet, so, I mean, I don't see why anybody wouldn't enjoy this part of the build process. I'm just going to put some more Titebond in the holes for the other side of the dowels, and then spread some across the surface where we're going to do the glue up joint. Now I've had people tell me before that I use too much glue, and maybe that's true, but I prefer to have extra and then have to clean it up than to not have enough and it doesn't get a good solid bond. So that's just my thought on it. Everybody can do it how they want, for sure. And then I got my helper out here again helping me get this thing put together. clamps. And again, maybe I over clamp it. I don't know. But better safe than sorry in my book. And then we're going to get up the next morning and get the clamps off and work on cleaning up our glue squeeze out. Now, I didn't get to it the night before. I goofed up, and so it was pretty hard. So I had to break out the chisel to get to it and get the glue, at least the big chunks, cleaned up. We're going to do a lot of sanding and stuff on this anyway, so I wasn't really worried about it too much. Now, you're also going to notice quite a few wardrobe changes during this video. I actually filmed this over about a month period. We took vacation in between time and various other projects, so that's why I'm wearing a lot of different stuff. But now we're starting to work on the legs for this console table, and we're going to go through a similar process as we did with the top. We've got to mill down to our length, then we're going to rip the edges, and then we're going to clean up the face fronts. And we are going to cut these to 38.5 inches long. That, combined with the thickness of the top, will give us the right height to meet at the top of the client's back of their couch, which is what they requested. And then we're going through the process again, taking off those rounded edges on both sides, because ultimately we're going to glue these up and make squared legs. Now we've got something more manageable for our jointer. This is more what this thing was designed for, something this length. So no need for my helper on this one. But we want to get our faces cleaned up on both sides, but especially for one side, because the two sides that are going to be glued together need to be really flush. And now we're doing our glue up. And these things are going to end up being 3x3 square legs once we get them glued up and get the final milling done. And I did this leg glue up in a couple of batches because we're making 8 of these total. Now I'm fully ready for the jointer police to write me a ticket on this one. I know this is horrible practice. Again, I let the glue dry too much overnight, got busy, and instead of scraping it off with a chisel first, I thought, let's just see if we can run it through the jointer. This is probably horrible for the blades. I really want to change the blades on this thing anyways and put better blades on it, so I thought we'd see what happens. Turns out it cleaned up really well. Then we're just going to shave off our ends here to get our nice clean end. Be the top and the bottom of the legs, of course. And then we're going to end up cutting these to our final length of 38.5 with just a little bit of trimming. And these are the type of projects and the parts of the projects where I really appreciate and am glad I put in the stop block track on the miter saw station when I built it. Man, it just makes these repeated cuts so much quicker and so much easier. 2 thumbs up. Highly recommend. And then I decided to do a chamfer on the legs and also did the same chamfer on the top. Now, I will say, you'll see a little later on, but I do wish I would have left one corner of these legs to the point, because when I put my bottom shelf in, it's been a lot easier to have everything line up without that small chamfer, but we figure that out later. And then just sanding up and cleaning these up, of course. Alright, now we're going to start cutting our stretchers, and we're cutting several different lengths of these. Out of 2x4s, we're going to cut 8 at 9 3/4. We're going to do 8 at 10.5 inches, and we're going to do 4 for our center stretchers at 48 inches. Now, those smaller ones are going to be for our 2 end cabinets with the shelves, and then, like I said, those 4 longer ones are going to be our connector pieces to stretch across the middle. And then this project is like instructions on a shampoo bottle, a lot of rinse and repeat. So here we're taking off our rounded edges again from all the stretchers. And here I'm just cutting a small dado in each of the stretcher pieces. This will be where our Z-clip attaches in from the stretchers and screws into the bottom of the top of the table. Using the Z-clips allows for seasonal movement of the wood, and will help prevent it from bowing as temperature change and climate change or temperatures inside the house or any of those things. Way better than screwing directly from the base into the top. And then I decided I wanted to put that same chamfer around the bottom of the legs so it'll just look a little cleaner. Even though most of them are going to be hidden between the couch and the wall. Now it's pocket hole time. This is how I'm going to connect the stretchers and the legs together. And I don't have a large, real fancy pocket hole machine, one of the big Craig ones, but I do have this handheld one and another one. I prefer this handheld one. And it takes a little bit more time to get them, attached to the wood itself before you drill the pocket holes, but I like it. And here we go. We're just getting our two ends put together, what I'm calling our cabinets, our end cabinets with our shelves. Just putting our stretchers in between the legs. And if you'll remember, we cut a couple different lengths of the stretchers. We have the 9 3/4 and then the 10 1/2. And I did this because since this console table is only going to be accessible from the two ends, since it's between the couch and a wall, I wanted to add a little more depth for the shelving from those end accesses. So I didn't make them a complete square. I made them a little bit deeper than I did wider to give them a little bit more room for baskets or books or anything else they wanted to put in there. You also may notice that, when I was doing those dados for the Z clips, I did put them in all the stretchers. I didn't really need those for the bottom stretchers, but it was real quick, real easy, and I didn't know at the time, I'm picking out the boards that have the best looking ones to be on the top, or on the ends, so I just went ahead and dadoed all of them. And I'm just doing a quick spray of primer, not the finished paint coat, but just a primer coat to help everything adhere and bond a little better when we put our paint on. So here I'm inside my office. I had a bunch of projects going on in the shop, and I didn't want wet paint out there while I was making more sawdust. So we carried this into my office and to do the actual painting on it. And I used this Rust-Oleum milk paint designed for furniture. It's the first time I've ever used milk paint, and man, I loved it. One, it had basically no odor, so it was great for painting inside with. And two, it went on so smooth. So I'll definitely be using that moving forward. Now it's time for the most challenging part of this whole project, and I figured it would be. And maybe I could have done this a little differently up front, but this is how I ended up doing it because I hadn't really decided until this point exactly what I wanted to do. So I'm making a template here for our bottom shelf. And remember, it's got to get around those four legs in our shelf cabinet on the ends. And I decided at the last minute to use some of these pre-surfaced project panels like you can buy at Lowe's or Home Depot. I really wanted something thinner than the big 2x that we'd been using for the rest of the project. And so I thought these would be better to help keep down some of the weight and also create maximum space for, like I said, baskets or storage on that bottom shelf. And these are going to end up being about 15 3/4 by 15 3/4, depending on how much overhang you may want. And this is where my ADHD really starts kicking in, and I've got to change projects within the project. So I'm back to now sanding this top. Um, Even though it's been several days, I haven't got the sanding yet, so we're doing that. And of course, this is just going to be a process, especially when you're using construction lumber. And you'll see here how I'm kind of showing where there's some high spots. So we've got to get those high spots out as much as totally possible. And so we mark them out with a pencil, kind of a trick to do. And then as you sand, you watch your pencil erase with the sander, and you'll know that you're getting down to flat. And so this is going to be a process in several steps, but I wanted to show you what it looked like in case you haven't done a glue up or a slab or anything out of construction lumber. You can kind of see what the process is to get to that point. And there may be other ways to do it as well. This is how I do it. and I just put my earbuds in. You can see my phone there on my wife's pink phone prop, and I just put my earbuds in, put some YouTube on in front of me, and just get to it. So, and then here we are. We've got the high spots down somewhat, and so now we're going to go over the entire thing, and the goal is to sand off all the pencil marks. So anytime you're making a longer panel, it's a good idea to leave it a little longer originally than you actually want it, so you can do this thing here. So we are getting this cut down to that final 82-inch length, taking off the factory ends, creating our own smoother ends. Alright, as you can see here, had a little mess up and had a little chip when I first started running the saw. And that kind of thing happens, especially when you're talking about pine and lumber like this. So we'll take that off using our chamfer and a little bit of elbow grease, and we'll get that looking okay on the corner there. This is going to be the bottom side of the top anyways, so no harm, no foul. And here we go with our chamfer to match our legs. Now, I've talked about this in videos before, that I prefer using chamfers on items that are square or rectangular. I feel like it kind of mirrors the shape of that piece of furniture or that item. If I have an item, whether it's a cutting board or furniture that's round, I like using a round over. So I try to make them match. Again, that's just how I like to do it. And then here we go, we are putting on our pre-stain conditioner. Now this is very important if you're using pine like this and using this lumber, is to use this pre-stain conditioner so you can get as even of a stain as possible. It's still tough to get it totally even, and I didn't even show you the staining process because I forgot to turn the camera on, but as you can see, I've got it stained now, and we were just wiping off the excess after we let it sit for just a little bit. And I'm using this Jacobean stain that you hear me talk about all the time in videos when I stain things. I love the Jacobean. It's absolutely my favorite color for my projects. Alright, now we're over at the bandsaw. That I got the big top out of the way. I feel better about that, and I can work on some of the smaller pieces. So this is that bottom shelf. So we're at the bandsaw here cutting out our corners that are going to fit around those legs. And this is where I talked about, I kind of wish I'd have left the inside corner of those legs at a total 90-degree square instead of doing the chamfer on all four sides, because when I go to put this thing in, I've got to leave a little extra room, and we're going to have a few spots where I've got to do some touch-up right at those corner areas. And this is the part of the video where we talk about safety and how I should be wearing safety glasses. Yeah. You see, that just happened, and I'm glad I caught it on video because it's an important lesson about wearing your safety equipment in your shop. So after I took a breather and got done getting over my heart attack, I did put a new belt on and proceeded to finish up with that job. And here we go, we are now working on our smaller shelves that are going to go halfway up those end cabinets. These are ultimately going to end up being about 10.5 wide by 15.5 on the depth. Remember, we're giving them more room for baskets and storage since the access is from the ends. And then now I've put on my safety glasses because I'm kind of all shook up. So more rinse and repeat here, taking off the rounded edges. And we're going to go through the milling process and get everything flat and straight as possible. And these boards really push the capabilities of how wide you could go on my jointer here. And I didn't think they were going to fit, but I was able to get them through. I mean, just barely. Now we're just doing our glue up for those shelves. And since we've got our nice flat square pieces now, We're going to put the ends together. Now I didn't do dowels in these like I did the top, obviously, because it's a lot smaller size and it's going to be down inside the end cabinets, so didn't think that was necessary. I finally got some pieces small enough that I can fit them through my 13-inch planer, so you can go up to about 12.5 inches on that. And so this obviously is going to save a lot of time with sanding on these pieces. We can get them pretty flat and smooth right here on the planer. And of course we're doing just a little bit of touch-up sanding, mainly around the edges here, but not too much is needed. And then we're going to cut to our final dimensions, which is that 10.5 by 15.5. And we're going to do that same matching chamfer on these shelves as well. That way everything looks nice and uniform and has more of a finished edge, which I think is really important when you're working with this construction lumber and this pine. And we did our pre-stain conditioner already. You can kind of see the coloring of that, and now we're putting on some more of this Jacobean. And I don't know how many times I can say it, but man, I love this Jacobean stain. Y'all are definitely going to get tired of me saying that throughout all my videos. And then I'm just touching some things up a little bit and putting some dowels in these pocket hole areas, and I'm going to cut them off flush and paint. Even though these aren't going to be seen because they're going to be hidden again behind the couch and the wall, but I just thought it would look nicer just to have it done that way anyways, regardless. And they're not hidden by the shelves like the rest of the pocket holes. So, and now we're just measuring where we want to put our shelves, the center shelves. And I'm just going to use little shelf pegs and put those directly in. So I'm drilling the holes for that, and the shelves will sit on that. And I did want to briefly show one of the Z clips and putting that in just in case you weren't familiar with what those were. They'll fit in those dados that we put in the stretchers and then screw into the underside of the table. And this allows, like I said, table float and for the wood to expand and contract and move a little bit if need be. And here we're just sliding our center shelves in. And they are a tight fit, which is good. That's what I wanted. But they're going to set on those shelf pegs and good to go. Now we did all that hard work with the nice paint, and now we're going to take the sandpaper and scuff up the edges and the corners a little bit and in a few different places. And that's because this is a farmhouse style console table. And really that's kind of what our woodworking business does, is we really do more of the rustic farmhouse type stuff. And so quite frequently on our projects we do a little bit of this roughing up before we put our clear on, and it gives it that cool look. We're getting close, guys. So now we're putting our clear coat on. I do usually do about 3 coats of this. This first one I do with the foam brush, and then I'll go back and do the next couple with a roller. And I know everybody's got ideas of how they like to do their clear coat. I do it different ways. It's just how I'm doing it for this project. I really like the way that the roller, kind of the texture and the smoothness that it gives, especially if you have the right kind of roller. And so that's what we went with for this project. And I took the shelves out, as you can see. They are over on the workbench drying with the clear coat. All right, last step, and we'll be ready to have this thing presented to the client. Now they wanted an electrical outlet, or several of them in the top here. So I got a box that has 3 outlets, a couple USBs, and then a C port. And we're gonna mount that right into the top of the console table here. Now, this is the part that really makes you nervous because you spent so much time and this thing looks great and you're happy with it, and then you're drilling a bunch of holes in the top of it, and that's a little nerve-wracking. So I tried to use the oscillating tool right up front, and I don't know if my blade was a little dull or what, and it wouldn't go all the way through it, so I decided to drill, as you saw, and then use the tool just to clean up around the edges and a little bit of chisel work here as well, and bam, right in there. And here we go. Here's our finished product, totally done and complete and ready for the client. And I couldn't be happier with it. I think for the budget we had and using the construction lumber, I It's got the farmhouse rustic feel that I wanted it to have, and I think it'll serve the clients great for the purpose they want it for, to sit behind their couch, and they can use for storage and charging items and lamps and books and various other things. And I'm excited to give it to them, and I hope they really enjoy it. Thank you guys for watching. We'll talk to you again next time. Be blessed.